Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we're going to have so much fun today. I love it when I get to talk with guests about a subject that I know nothing about, because I get to learn, and I hope that the people who watch and listen to the program learn too. So today we're going to be talking to a luthier. Did I say that right? Did I come close? Oh, yay! So today we're going to be talking to Dereck Coons. So welcome to our program, Dereck.
Thank you, Deb. It's great to be here.
Well, let me explain to people a little bit about you, and then we'll have you talk about just what the heck it is that you do. So right. Dereck Coons has been making violins for over 20 years. That's what makes him a luthier. He began his formal education at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. He opened his own violin shop in Tampa, Florida in 2013 and has been very successful. He continues to enjoy building instruments and running his business. He hopes to be able to step away from the day-to-day operations of running a business to spend more time on building unique and beautiful instruments. So again, Dereck, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Well, I always like to ask my guests to tell us how it is that they got to where they are today and how you discovered, and I know you discovered this, obviously a while ago, why this is your passion in life. So tell us a little bit more about all of this.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Everybody that's life revolves around music has a unique story on how they get into it. And, everybody that I talk to, it's always a little different, but there's similarities. So mine started, I guess I discovered classical music when I was maybe an early teenager. Okay. And it wasn't through an education system or a normal way. I mean, I was actually doing math homework one day and realized stuff just started making sense and I didn't understand why. And then the music that was in the background stopped and then everything got cloudy again. Mm-hmm. So it was actually a TV program. I believe it was a story of Mozart's life. And I realized that when the music started again, the math started making sense again. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't sure what that was, So my next trip to the store, I bought a couple of cassette tapes of classical music, and that was my go-to every time I had math. It just made it more enjoyable. It made things make sense. I started playing guitar around 15 years old, and it wasn't until I went to college, probably my late teens, early 20s, that I started studying classical guitar. As an elective in college. I was sort of on a pre-med track. It wasn't even, it wasn't a musical career path for me. It was just relaxation. And about the third semester in, my professor said, "You know what? I'm going to help you out. I'm going to push you a little beyond your comfort zone. You need a better guitar. And I don't want you to register next semester till you have a better guitar." Well, for a kid paying his way through college and not really wanting or knowing if I wanted a career in music, $4,000 or $5,000 for a guitar wasn't in the budget.
Oh, no.
I had a summer to get it sorted, otherwise I couldn't enroll, and that was my stress relief. I was on like I said, a pre-med track where I was studying anatomy, physiology, chemistry, biology, and guitar was really my release. It was my creative side.
Right.
So I was singing the blues to my friend one day, telling him the whole story, and he just happened to drop a bombshell and mention, my dad teaches violin making at the university. And I said, well, I don't know what that's got to do with the guitar, but I'll talk to him and see if maybe I can make a guitar instead.
Right. It seems like father. Strings, wood.
I figured, why not? I was always good with my hands. I grew up in a do-it-yourself sort of household where if you wanted something done, figure it out. And I was always encouraged to take things apart and figure out how they worked. And so I met his father, who's Tom Sparks, became a dear friend. I asked him, can I build a guitar instead? And he said, absolutely not. I teach violin making. I'd be happy to have you in the course for the summer. But I can guarantee you that if you absorb what I teach for violin making, guitar making will come as second nature.
Okay.
And so that's what I did, you know. Actually, the experience of walking up into that workshop was so profound. Indiana University is a very famous school of music, you know, and Jacobs School of Music in Bloomington. And at that time, I think it's still there in its same format. The shop is no longer there, but the round practice building, it only has windows on the first and second floor, I believe. And then it's 5 or 6 stories and there's no windows. And you walk around these corridors and it's a practice building.
Practice rooms.
So you're just surrounded with this, you know, this ethereal sound when you walk around, and every room has a different instrument. It might be a violin, a cello, a trumpet, a euphonium, or maybe the piano. And it was just kind of like being in this dream world. And then we got to the top floor, and then he opened this doorway and it went up this long, narrow staircase to this kind of dark, quiet room, but you could hear stuff going on in this room, little scraping and, you know, the sounds of wood being worked and the smell of varnish. And like, I just walked up there and I felt like this is
heaven.
Like, this is cool, you know? And so I did. I enrolled that semester. I took the course for the summer. It was 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. And by the end of the summer, I had made a guitar at home, not in that shop.
Right. Because he had said, no, just violins.
Yeah. I learned how to sharpen tools, how to sharpen a knife, how to sharpen a plane, how to make a sound post, how to do a basic repair on a violin, and began my construction process on my first violin, which is building the form. And then I would go home and I cobbled together the tools that I needed and bought the wood and stuff necessary. And I became obsessed. I built my first guitar. I brought it back to my guitar professor and he was very impressed and said, this is fantastic. This is a massive improvement over what you had. Let's go. So I continued studying guitar. By the next semester, I had switched focus and quit doing my academic studies so much and went into full-time violin making. It was a 2-year program. I did take a couple physics courses because I figured that might help with
to know how to bend the wood and
absolutely. And how sound works, how it reflects off surfaces, you know, how it travels through different materials at different speeds, how concert halls are constructed and how they balance the sound, you know. If a concert hall is half full, they'll put drapes down or fill the air up because the human body actually absorbs sound. So after the 2-year program and I finished my first violin, I kind of knew that was it, you know. And before I even got my associate's certificate, he asked me what I was doing for that summer. And I said, I don't know. He said, well, you want a job? And I said, well, I got to finish class. We have a month left, 2 months left. He said, no. I've got a colleague in Indianapolis that needs somebody. I would love for you to meet him and see if you guys can work it out. And if you go and you work, I'll satisfy your requirement for class. That's your credit. And that was, you know, the late 1990s. And I started at a shop in Indianapolis at Casa del Sol, and I've been building and, you know, enjoying this life ever since.
I love it. You know, and like I said, this is something I know nothing about. And I just kind of assumed that violins were not mass produced, but kind of in a factory type of thing, you know, like pianos. I mean, you do a whole bunch at once. And, you know, reading about you and listening to you, you know, these are, you know, it never occurred to me that there are artisans who are creating these, because these are not just instruments. These are works of art that, you know, each one you are creating is unique and custom made and things like that. And so that's what fascinates me about this, is just knowing that, oh my gosh, this is such a process to get this beautiful instrument.
Absolutely. I mean, there is definitely what you just said. It is true. not everyone can afford an instrument made by one person from start to finish with an ideal sound and an ideal look and feel in mind. So the factory produced instruments are very real.
Right. And that's great for many, many people.
Has to be. There's no way that everyone could afford to start playing if everyone had a custom handmade violin by one person built for them. I have a shop here in Tampa, Florida, and the majority of what we sell is factory made instruments that are made to a very high standard, but it makes it affordable for kids to be able to start playing the instrument, and that sort of cultivates and builds your audience later on that are going to want something that's truly unique and special for them.
Right. And of course we all know about Stradivarius. I mean, that's the pinnacle. But there's obviously so much that is in between that, again, we just never even stop to think about, and we know, anyone who follows any type of classical music or anything like that. I mean, especially for the concert, the first violinists, people like that, clearly they are using custom made instruments. So kind of talk us through this process. If someone comes to you and says, "Hey, Dereck, need a new violin," what is the process of working with them?
Yeah, it's a great question. Throughout this, I mean, the violin is such a rich history. It's been being built in the same manner for, since the 1500s, essentially. Not much of the design work has changed. And typically violinists have been left, to hunt and find their sound by trying many different instruments. Their budgetary restrictions sort of set the limit at what they can and cannot try or afford. And to me, it took 20 years to sort of really understand what was going on with the violin. You have to build dozens and dozens of instruments. I think my instrument count is somewhere around 100 instruments.
Wow.
If you add the guitars, the violins, the violas, the cellos, everything that I've built for the last 20 years. And it wasn't until I met, Dmitry Badriov, who's been an incredible influence, and of course, my original mentor, Tom Sparks. They helped me sort of understand that you can craft and create a particular sound by choosing the materials, choosing the woods that you want, the different pattern or shape that you decide to use. And having a solid outcome in mind before you put the pen to paper to start the design of the instrument really helps, So I look at it now, like if you were going to go look for your dream home, if you wanted to find your dream home, you could look in the marketplace and see what's available and go and find, and you can make appointments with realtors and go and look and see what's done. But truly, most people that end up with their dream home build their dream home. They sit down with a designer, an architect, and, I want this many bedrooms, this many bathrooms, I want it to look like this, feel like this. And then you end up with what you really want. And so that's the angle. And that's the way that I've been working for the last year or two, is instead of building a product, building an instrument, building a violin or cello or viola, and putting it for sale and hoping that somebody comes in and likes what's made, it's a lot better to sit down with the artist and say, okay, what do you want? And then let us get both very clear on what we mean by the words we use. What does a clear sound mean? What does a full sound mean? We'll try,
because the materials differ. The woods are different,
and also the language depth it's clear might mean something to me than it does to you.
Right.
Because sound is so subjective, it's really hard to define exactly what it is. So a fuzzy sound, is it fuzzy like a wool sweater, or is it fuzzy like
static radio?
Right. And what does an edge mean to a sound? So we have all these adjectives we use for sound, but a lot of them are tactile adjectives. A lot of them are, other sensory, visual adjectives, and they're not auditory. So becoming more clear with the artist of what you want helps me to achieve that sound so much easier. And there's something intuitive that guides you as an artist when you're working. So if somebody says, I want a very solo sound, I want something that's going to project on stage.
Okay.
I want something that the person in the back of the hall is going to be able to feel. They're going to be able to hear it. I'll build that completely differently than if somebody says, you know what, I don't like playing on stage. I just like playing at my house for my enjoyment. Those are two different I would choose the wood differently.
Mm-hmm.
I would even choose the design slightly differently on the instrument because it doesn't need to have power. So yeah, the collaboration and finding out what do they want and getting clear with our language and maybe even listening to different recordings and saying, I like this recording, I don't like this one. That really helps guide me in choosing the materials, the pattern, the shape, the varnish, everything that goes into the string choice, the pegs, all of that has an influence on the sound. So that's where I'm at now. And I don't necessarily take, I do pre-orders, and that's how I like to work because you have to collaborate with somebody. It's simply a deposit. And if you're not 100% satisfied, you're not committed to buying the instrument.
Okay. Right.
You know, I want you to be perfectly happy.
Right. Because you want them to use it.
Absolutely. I want them to love it. And I want them to treat it like the heirloom that it's going to be, that they can pass down to their, you know, to their siblings or to their children, or, you know, violins have always had a very special place. The instrument, the musicians are more caretakers of that instrument than owners.
Right.
And real musicians know that. And I can't tell you how many times I've had a client come in with their violin after their retirement and say, you know, I would like to sell it because it's not being played and it's very sad. My violin's not happy because it's not singing.
Right.
It's more important to them that they find somebody that will appreciate and love that instrument and play it than how much money they get for it.
Right.
Like it's a sentimental, you know, and that's what I want to build. I want to build an heirloom that parents are going to be able to create memories with their children with, you know, and they're going to look at that maybe even after the parents are gone and think, and be able to relive those stories, be able to relive those holidays and concerts and experiences. You know, to me, that's touching. That's
right. Well, and it does, you know, the instrument does, you know, it becomes a part of them. And, you know, and it is so special. I remember I saw a program on the news, local news here in Atlanta, not long ago. And it's a program that provides instruments to high school children. I guess they're not children at that point, but high schoolers who can't otherwise afford them, which is, you know, a great many, especially when you consider that, you know, some of these instruments, as you said, cost thousands of dollars. And they had a young man in there who, as part of the program, he was gifting others, you know, because he'd received an instrument at one point and he had received a violin. And so as part of the program, he has been giving back. And so he helps, deliver instruments and things like that. And then they ended with someone who donated their custom violin that they were no longer playing anymore to this young man. And he cried. His mother cried. Everybody on camera cried. I mean, it was just such a moving gift that, you know, not only was it something that, you know, it had obviously meant a lot to the original owner, but the fact that they were giving it up and giving it to this young man who, you know, who knows what's going to happen with, you know, with his career down the road. But I mean, it was just one of those things where you probably could not have done anything more for that young man that he would have meant as much, even if they'd just given him the money and said, here, go do this. I mean, it was that whole passing of the torch kind of thing that was so important.
Absolutely. And we've done the same thing here with our shop in Tampa a number of years ago. It all started off with, I had a bunch of bows, a box of bows, older bows that weren't worth us rehairing to put up for sale, but they weren't totally done yet. Right. They had light. So I wanted to donate them to maybe an orchestra somewhere that had people that needed bows. So I collaborated with, I believe it was Francisca Mendoza, who is Chilean. She's a Chilean violinist. We have since then collaborated with her brother Alejandro, who's working with us in Sarasota, a tremendous violinist. And we got affiliated with an organization out of Chile and ended up sending 50 violins to orphanage in Chile. And talking with the directors, they said, you know, this will impact over 2,500 children's lives, because these instruments will be passed on from grade to grade. And it just made me think, you know, what if it only changes one person's life? What if only one person? That's enough, you know, and it's going to affect so many more, because when you have people that are impoverished, or people that are less fortunate than others, and then they're given this gift of creativity and escape. It opens up worlds. It opens up a whole new world to them of possibilities. And so, yeah, it's a tremendously, beautiful thing to be involved in. And I, every day I'm grateful. I belong to a business networking group here in Tampa, and, a lot of them sell maybe insurance or
business things,
business stuff that normal people need. And I told my wife, I said, I'm so incredibly fortunate that what we're contributing to society is about beauty. It's about art. It just makes everybody's lives better.
Right. So, yeah. I mean, music truly is, something that is so important. And that's one of those things that I've known for so many years, and it changes the mood. I mean, all of those various things, but, it's also, I mean, you mentioned the correlation between math and music. And that's just something that fascinates me also. I mean, it truly is a mathematical process that happens to make music, and then, so if you're good at that, then you're probably good at regular math.
Yeah, there's a number of studies, and you can find them going both ways. Them saying, "Oh, it has nothing to do with it," or "It does." But even counting music, learning how to count the beats in the music and understanding how to read music requires a lot of math.
Right.
Whether or not music helps you with math. It helped me.
Well, and it helps your brain just to go and develop the processes of, you do this and this and this. You can't just randomly start doing. There's a procedure you have to follow.
Absolutely. When you get into the physics of it and you start studying frequency, then math becomes incredibly important. It's not base 10 math. Right. It's not a normal math decimal system that we're used to using. But yeah, music can be fully explained using mathematics. And we use a ton of math in the design and the proportion of the instrument. Yeah, they're completely interlinked.
Right. And I've always known how important music is to children. That was one of the things. Now I don't have kids, but during COVID, when schools were shut down, one of the things that bothered me the most, I mean, clearly kids were able to continue with their education online, varying degrees of success, and we're finding all that out, but they couldn't do what schools consider the extracurricular activities, sports and music. And I think those two, I mean, they are very similar in, the thought processes, the teamwork. I mean, all of those things. And for a child to lose that, even just for a semester, I think that was very detrimental. Now, we understood why, but, it just, that pained me greatly that kids could not participate in those things.
Well, I mean, in some places, I know it was very difficult. I think that here in Tampa, Florida,
we learned Zoom, right? Those kids learned how to do this on Zoom.
Absolutely. And the educators here in Hillsborough seen it coming, and they got together very quickly and developed a program so that the music continued. It wasn't the same as in person,
right?
But even here at the shop, we had to mandate shutdown for a month, and we had to really brainstorm and say, okay, we don't know what the future is going to bring. We don't know what's going to hold, but what can we do? Right. How can we provide how can we be a voice of calm and reassurance in this uncertain time? So the whole team here at the shop got together, and we decided, let's have a contest on what does music mean to you? And Deb, the letters that we got from teachers and from, so the rules were you had to be, playing a musical instrument, no older than 18, I believe it was, submit an essay or a video and just tell us, what does it mean to you? And you would not believe some of the stuff that we got. I mean,
how much did you cry? I bet you cried a lot.
Man, it's so hard to choose a winner. We ended up giving every participant, a gift certificate so that they could come in. And the winner ultimately got a violin outfit that his family couldn't have afforded.
Right.
And it meant the world to him. And it's just, even though things shut down, some people really took that opportunity to really grow as a musician. that all that home time that we all had,
Right. That
what
could
did
be
we
practice
do?
time. Mhm.
I built a quartet. I mean, I went home and I said,
Mhm.
you know what, I've got a month.
Mhm.
Let's get busy. And so I built,
Mhm.
I believe it was 3 violins and 1 viola. So not a
Okay.
proper quartet, but one of which I built for a dear friend of mine and a
Mhm.
colleague of the shop,
Mhm.
a custom 5-string violin. And then I think I built another viola and 2 instruments that I don't think I have any of them left. They've all since been sold. But they had a lot of meaning to me because they were built in that time where, we had to make the best of what we had.
Right. And that it just fascinates me, as I was saying, the process that you go through. And so, of course, one of the questions I have is, on average, how long does it take to make a custom violin?
The industry standard for makers is between 150 and 200 hours. And that doesn't include, as my professor would say, procrastination and reconnoitering.
Right, where you're thinking,
you're sitting there drinking your coffee and you're looking at it thinking, I wonder if should I make the F holes a little bit like this or like this? Roll, is everything the way I want it to be? On average, 150 to 200 hours.
Okay. Wow. And as I said, these truly are art pieces also. And my neighbor collects custom ukuleles. And it's so interesting to see because very different woods, all very different, obviously, not a huge size difference, but there is size difference. And so she displays them like pieces of art, but she also plays them, but it's interesting to me, the different sounds, as you were saying, just the slight different size or the different wood makes it so very different. And that just, that's so cool.
Absolutely. With the violin, it's a little more stringent just because of the history. So the woods that we use, it's always going to be spruce for the top.
Okay.
And maple for the back sides and neck. It doesn't vary too much. I mean, you could build one out of mahogany or walnut, but it's going to be a fiddle. It's not going to be a violin.
Right.
It's going to have
sound is different.
It absolutely. There's a very special quality of sound, and especially the spruce. Very unique material. Sound travels differently in spruce and faster in spruce than just about any other material. How they knew that 300 years ago, I don't know. I don't know how they chose.
It would have been interesting to have seen like the floor of their workshops, because I'm sure there were lots of rejected things.
And the tools, Deb, I mean, to think that they built these works of art during the Renaissance in a world lit by fire. There was no electricity. There was no power tools. There was no air conditioning. It was, if you look at the tools in the museums that they were using, they're really primitive, yet they ended up with these incredible works of art, so it humbles me knowing that I have a bandsaw to use, or I have some power tools in the beginning that sort of really expedite the process. That being done 300 years ago would have been totally different.
Right.
Wood, though, like you just mentioned with the ukuleles, traditional ukuleles are built with koa wood from Hawaii. So the region in which they were created is going to determine the materials that were used. And that still holds true today. Right. I mean, for me, building a custom violin, I pretty much am very picky about the spruce. I only want it from a very small mountain region, North Italy, South Switzerland. Right. That's where I want my spruce. After 20 years, I've tried spruce from all over the world, but that to me is the most consistent. I know what I'm going to get when I get it from there. Right. The same with the maple. I want the maple from the Balkan mountain region. It has a different density. It has a different working quality and a different sound, Right. So yeah. And then knowing the woods and, knowing what you got to deal with. And I'm like a kid in a candy store when I get a new shipment of wood, or I find, a luthier calls me and telling me he's retiring and he's got a wood pile. I go, it's just, I get excited. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
So,
because as you said, where the tree grew is, makes a huge difference, because length of daylight, hot, cold, humid, not humid. I mean, all of those things are going to make the wood more dense, less dense. I mean, all sorts of different things that are obviously going to affect the sound quality.
Absolutely. And the physical characteristics of the wood. There's one story that I like to tell. It's about where a tree grows and how a tree grows
Mm-hmm.
has a huge impact on the quality and the character of the material.
Mm-hmm.
And it's mirrored in human, in our existence.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the pains and struggles we go through in life, we don't see the character that they're building.
Mm-hmm.
If you took a maple seed and you planted it in an open field and gave it plenty of water and
Mm-hmm.
plenty of sun, it never had to struggle or compete for
Mm-hmm.
light, it's going to grow nice and strong
Mm-hmm.
and fast and be a very, very beautiful wood, but
Mm-hmm.
very little character.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Right,
going to
because
have
it never was challenged.
it never struggled,
Mm-hmm.
it never had to fight. It never
Mm-hmm.
had to reach, and it never had to be hungry or,
Mm-hmm.
and that really is true in the woods that I see.
Mm-hmm.
Typically violin makers want wood chosen from the north face of a mountain slope.
So they've been challenged.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
They grow slower, they grow more consistently.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have as much sunlight as the open field trees
Mm-hmm.
do, and the character of the wood that you get from some of the maples when they're challenged to
Mm-hmm.
grow, it's tremendous.
Mm-hmm.
Visibly, it's just stunning to look at. It's
Mm-hmm.
beautiful material.
So does the wood speak to you? So if you've got, say, two pieces of wood, this one is the one that I'm choosing today?
Absolutely. Depending on the character of the
Mm-hmm.
instrument that I want to make.
Mm-hmm.
You can take a piece of spruce in your hands and sort of rub it with your fingers, and
Mm-hmm.
it makes a crispy sound, or it makes a dull sound, or
Mm-hmm.
it speaks,
Mm-hmm.
and after handling thousands of violins, when
Mm-hmm.
you pick up a violin, just the sound of your fingers touching the fingerboard and touching
Mm-hmm.
the rim of the violin, that sound transfers over. And so
Mm-hmm.
you're listening for, it's almost you're guided intuitively.
Mm-hmm.
But absolutely the wood
Mm-hmm.
speaks.
Right. And so that's part of how you choose, if it's going to be, a piece, as you were saying, for somebody who's just, a member of an orchestra or the soloist, because that's going to broadcast differently.
Absolutely. The closeness of the growth rings, the width of the winter growth in a piece of spruce, to me, is incredibly important. It can't be too thin. It can't be too wide.
Mm-hmm.
I look at a violin top a lot as like a truss structure on a house.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So you have these beams that go through the roof of the house.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like little lines that go through the top of the violin.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on the load that you're putting on it, you need those to be stronger or weaker or closer spaced or further
Mm-hmm.
spaced. It's about structure and then the transmission of sound through that structure.
Mm-hmm.
But choosing wood is incredible. To me, is probably the single most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is don't sacrifice on the quality of the material that you're
Mm-hmm.
using on the violin.
Right. And clearly, because these are custom pieces, that's why this is taking so much more of your initial process.
Absolutely. I mean, for the first 20 years or so, 18, 19 years, I built copies. I built copies of violins, copies of famous Stradivari's, of Guarneri's, Amati's, Ruggeri's. I've had the good fortune to have had a number of colleagues with very, very nice instruments that they allowed me to take patterns off of, tracing, measurements. But after all that, I sort of came to the conclusion after studying with Dimitri that I don't have to make copies anymore.
So much.
I can alter the design now to get closer to what I really want than ending up with just another copy of a Stradivari. I mean, no one alive is going to reach the fame of Stradivari.
Right. Yeah. There was just something that was perfect about that time.
Right. And nowadays those instruments are beyond the affordability of most musicians,
Well, and there would always be the fear of something happening, and I mean, that would just be devastating. But to be able to have one and play it, oh my gosh, that, for someone who is at that level, that clearly would be just the ultimate goal.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't know that if it's just to play the Stradivari, but what they're really looking for, and what I've come to understand, is a connection. They're looking for a connection with an instrument to where when they think of a particular sound, they're able to make it. They're looking for something that does what they ask it to do, and that sometimes challenges them a little bit, a lot of the famous instruments, a lot of the very well-known instruments, when the players were first given the instruments, they didn't like them. It's not a love at first sight thing. They realized that, oh my God, this thing, you know, typically like an Amati, the experience that I've had and the feedback from these great musicians are some of the earlier instruments like the Amatis, you can't play them with the same force that you would play a modern instrument. Right. You break the sound. And you have to just go more delicately and ask it softer, you know, and it's, I've always been fascinated by psychology and especially neurolinguistics. Milton Erickson, I think I've read just about everything he's written. And one of the things that Milton said early on was, it wasn't his siblings, he noticed, it wasn't what they asked for that determined whether or not they got it. It was how they asked. And so that's kind of, I try to sort of carry that through now with musicians. It's sometimes it's not what you're asking the instrument to do. It's how are you asking it to do it? How much bow speed, how much bow pressure are you using? Are you squeezing too much with your left hand? And with me, it's the same with wood. You know, I can ask it to do it all I want, but how am I asking? Where am I shaping it from? Where am I thinning it here? Where am I expanding a proportion? And so the musicians are looking for that connection. They're looking for that. They want what you just said, you know, that magical experience of like, oh my God, this is the sound that I hear in my head, you know, because that's really what violinists are doing. Is the violin is an extension of your voice. It's an extension of what you hear in your head, that if you were a vocalist, you would just sing. Right. You know, to me, the voice is one of the most beautiful instruments ever created, because you don't need anything. It's just there. You don't need an instrument. You don't need anybody to make that for you, but you have to work really hard. Right. To get what you hear up here. To get that sound. And so that's what violinists are looking for. They're looking for an instrument from the time that they pick it up, that they're just like, they're taken aback. And it's like, oh my God, this feels good. This sounds good. And even the smell, like it smells, the violin has a sweet smell. It has to engage all of your senses, you know, for it to be. And as we said, it becomes an extension of them. Absolutely. Okay. I have a stupid question. You probably get asked this, but I'm going to ask this stupid question anyway. Are there right hand and left hand violins? I mean, we see, you know, people put it on their left shoulder and then you bow with the right. Do they ever play the other way around? Very rarely. So if you are left-handed, you're just learning differently how to play. Yes. Many like writing. Yeah, it's like writing, because both hands are so important with the violin. So your left hand is the one that fingers the notes on the string, the one that you would use. The right hand controls the bow. Both are equally as important. Right. So a left-handed player has a natural advantage for left-hand dexterity. They're going to be able to understand and grasp and probably learn the left-hand technique much faster. So they might be able to finger faster. I mean, all sorts of things. Right. They may struggle a little bit with the right hand initially, but it becomes second nature. Most violinists are pretty ambidextrous when it comes to that. You know? In the 20 plus years that I've been dealing with violins, I have seen maybe 2 or 3 people have custom made left-handed violins. And that was because they had previous experience playing a guitar or another string instrument, and they were used to holding it the other way. There's really little place in orchestra for a musician to be bowing the opposite direction. Yeah, because you're going to whoop the person next to you, right? You know, unless you're fourth chair, or however many chairs they have. Yeah, you don't fit. You know? I love that. Well, yeah, let's go to the business side of things, because you did start your own business, and this is clearly a very unique business. What were the challenges that you found in running starting and running the business? The challenges I found and still find, part of one's education, becoming a luthier, doesn't really involve any sort of business acumen. Right. You're an artist, and I like to refer to Michael Gerber's book. It's a fantastic book called The E-Myth, where we all people that start a business generally have an entrepreneurial seizure, where you think, you know what, why I could do this. I could do this on my own. I could do this for myself. So the reason I started the business, and I did have to start it with a business partner, was that the traditional model of a violin maker is you build a violin, you offer it for sale, and when you sell it, it's great. But when you don't sell it, times get hard. You know, you're an artist, and so maybe you're asking $5,000 or $10,000 or $15,000, you know, for your instrument.
Right. You sell it, that's great, but then wonk.
6 months and no income, it gets tough. You know? So I thought, you know what, I could build things and wait for people to come, and try and hope that my name grows, maybe enter a competition, or I could start a shop and grow clientele. You know, provide kids with instruments that they can become actual musicians with. You know, and
so these aren't the $10,000 ones.
Absolutely not. You know, let's start something to where elementary school students turn into middle school, turn into high school, then go to college, then get jobs. So yeah, in 2013, I believe it was, we opened the doors here in Tampa, Florida, 700 square foot retail space and workshop. So it was tiny. And I made a couple of phone calls to colleagues and friends of mine that I had known that I was going to do that in the area, and they were extremely supportive. And from day one, Deb, we've done well. I mean, we've grown consistently each year. We've hired incredible staff. Our turnover is virtually non-existent. We expanded and opened a second location just south of us in Sarasota. And continue to offer service rentals, you know, especially focused on school programs and kids. We drive to the schools, pick up their instruments, bring it back, fix them, redeliver them. Before COVID, we used to have violin workshop tours, where, as you can see behind me here, the workshop. I know it's probably backwards, but we would bring groups of school kids in and show them how violins are made from start to finish, and, you know, discuss how to take care of the instruments and give them a brief demonstration on how some of the tools go through the wood, and they got to go home with bags of shavings.
Fun.
You know, but the business it's a constant challenge. You know, business is different. It's not the art. Right. You know,
and so, having to stop and spend time on invoicing and networking.
You know, but it's a necessary evil. I mean, understanding how business works, understanding what a balance sheet is, you know, what an income statement is, what a cash flow statement is, how to structure things so that taxes aren't so bad at the end of the year, you know, and realizing that if you can get the business successful enough, then you can start building a legacy. You know, you can start leaving a major impact on the community, and because of the things that you're doing, and you have the strength to do that. So that's sort of my focus, you know, the last couple of years, even before COVID, was, you know, hey, we have to be profitable and successful enough that we can do these great things that we want to do. And yeah, it's a continual education as far as business is concerned. There's always something to learn, marketing, communication, you know, client services, customer service. I think that I've spent more time the last couple of years on learning business than I have learning violin making. You know?
You know, and it is always a challenge, you know, but I'm sure COVID obviously made things different. You know, are you able to meet with someone, you know, virtually, at least initially on starting the process when they want a custom violin?
Absolutely. I just got a call, matter of fact, yesterday from a friend of mine that's a very good violinist in Belfast. He has two colleagues that are in the UK, and they're very interested in a violin. And so he asked me what the process was. I said, well, we're going to meet by Zoom. We'll discuss what they want. You know, I believe it's a husband and wife. They've looked around the UK and looked around Europe for pricing, and it's just too much for them. What the market there, what they're asking, it's a lot. And so, yeah, I'll have the first meeting with them probably over Zoom or a phone call. We'll discuss things, and then I'll build the instruments, and then they can either come over and try them, or I can ship them or deliver them to them. You know,
right? Because at some point they need to put their hands on it, even though they're not completed. But
absolutely, you know, and it's just kind of like, I would never buy a new vehicle without test driving it. You know, I don't
understand these people who buy cars on the internet. I'm like, no, you got to kick the tires.
Trying shoes on, you know, like, no, I got to see how they feel. I want to know that they're right, you know? So yeah, that process can be started, and then maybe even a couple of calls along the way. You know, when you run into an issue or you say, well, you know, I'm not sure how they felt about this. Let's see. When it comes to varnish, everyone has a different idea. And it's amazing how psychologically impactful the way that an instrument looks affects its sound.
Right.
You know, my professor would call it psychoacoustics. If you have a violin that's very pale in color, you know, sort of a blonde or a yellow,
it doesn't seem like it's going to produce as rich a sound.
Absolutely. You know, whereas a dark red or a, you know, almost a Bordeaux
high
color,
gloss.
it has a shiny sound. No, it's a shiny varnish. You know, so knowing what sound they want and what color really attracts them, you know, it has to fit. Everything has to fit when you finally deliver the instrument. Like it almost, it needs to be like they've looked at it and they know they've seen that perfect thing before in their dream. You have to create that, you know. So those calls are enough. You know, they don't really need to see. I'll send a video clip or two of the building process. They always love to see wood being carved.
Yeah. You know, they want to know that how's the baby coming along? Right.
So yeah, the collaboration is totally fine, especially when it's transcontinental. You know, it makes travel sometimes very difficult. So yeah, Zoom, telephone call, it's all perfectly fine.
Right. I love it. You know, I should have asked you this before we started. Could you play for us? Do you have an instrument close enough that you could play a bit for us?
I've got one. I'm not a player. I mean, I can play. I can play enough to evaluate my instruments.
Okay.
But
interesting.
It is very interesting, and it's like I've come up with lots of analogies over the years to describe it. You don't have to be a criminal to be a lawyer. You don't have to be sick to be a doctor. The people that fly the space shuttle are not the ones that build it.
Right. True.
So I've dedicated my life to studying the history and the construction of violins.
Okay.
Not the performance.
I love that. That's very interesting.
The hours that I've spent at the workbench, the musician would spend at the stand. And I fear that if I played my violin for you, I'm not going to do it justice.
Right. And we wouldn't, you know, we wouldn't want that, because it is like we've been saying, it is a piece of art. And so you want it to be as best perceived as possible.
Absolutely.
Now, do you
I can provide anybody interested with clips of professionals playing?
I found one on Facebook, and you know, but yeah, I mean, it really is one of those things where in the right instrument in the right hands is very different. You know, like you said, you know, you can play it, you can test it, but when the right person picks it up, it sounds totally different. You know, and I think probably the easiest thing for many people who, you know, might not know is like the piano. I mean, you know, somebody can sit down and play chopsticks, but it takes somebody different to play Chopin, you know, and you know, there really is just a very big difference in, and it's not just the skill set, because, you know, there's that, but it's that passion, it's that heart, all of those other things that go into it.
And pianos are much the same way, Deb. I mean, a Bosendorfer has a completely different sound, Steinway. Both very noble sounds, both highly respected, but fundamentally a different character of sound. And that's what you find with violins, you know. Yeah, I recently had a comment from somebody that has one of my instruments in Texas that it was played on stage with a very, very expensive old Italian violin, and at some point there was a battle. And it was very interesting to hear the results, you know, because one was a highly affordable instrument and one was exorbitantly expensive. It's not always the expensive instruments that win.
Right. Yeah. And again, it's who's playing it, all of those various things.
Right.
Okay. So I have another stupid question, because I'm here in the South. Violin, fiddle. What is the difference? And is there really a difference?
The instruments are exactly the same. It's how you play it. It's what you play on it and how you play it. There's lots of little funny sayings. One has strings, one has strangs.
Especially if you're in the South, it has strings.
Right. It's really, there's a slight difference in the curvature of the bridge, because on a fiddle, they want to play a lot of double stops and sometimes triple stop. So the bridge is flatter. That doesn't allow the articulation of the bow as much freedom. But they're exactly the same instruments. Now the violin came over from Europe. It was a European instrument, came to America, and in early America, the music, we wrote our own music, and it was fiddle tunes, so it was derived from Hungarian dances and English dances, and stuff like that. But that's where fiddle music came from. Mark O'Connor is an amazing violinist, and he really delved into early American fiddle music. So anybody interested in learning the difference, just look him up. You'll learn a lot.
Interesting. I love that. Yeah, because they obviously look the same. But I've always wondered, what is the difference? And I mean, part of it would be obviously how it's made. A lot of times with a fiddle, they seem to be, I know I'm not saying this the correct way, but playing it harder. I'm just thinking of, The Devil Went Down to Georgia when they're playing that. I mean, that is hard moving music as opposed to the virtuing, soaring sounds of an orchestra. But yeah, to know that they're the same instrument, that's very interesting.
Absolutely the same.
Very cool. Very cool. So, how, do you, we talked a little bit, about some of the business things. How do you market what you do? When I talk with people, I always tell them you absolutely have to know who your niche is. And I always cringe when somebody says everyone, because clearly, it's not. And so you obviously know who your market is. So how do you reach them? And what are some of the things that you use? Because to me, that's fascinating because you do know exactly who you need to reach. And so, what are some of the tactics that you use?
Well, our organic growth happened so naturally that up until 2019, I didn't even consider that. I didn't even consider.
Word of mouth was all you needed.
That's all we needed, but that reaches you to a certain point until you sort of saturate your geographical market. Then you have to focus on who is your ideal client,
right.
And that's what we've done in the last year or so. We've gone through brand building workshops and sort of really honed in on who our ideal client is. So much is to even we've created an avatar, gave them a name.
I love it.
A sociographic, an economic parameter, and now we're in the process of really trying to develop that marketing structure. And I think it's an evolving process. I don't think it may work this year, but you're going to have to tweak it for next year. So every post that we make now, we try to look back upon our at our ideal client and say, will it resonate with them? Is this what they're after? And truthfully, the ideal client for my shop is slightly different than the ideal client for me to build an instrument for.
Right. So because you are looking for probably the concert violinist almost.
Maybe not even concert, but just somebody that really understands that connection with the instrument. That they have to have that connection, whether or not their
concert may be in their living room.
Absolutely. And some of my best clients, some of the best customers we've ever had here in the shop, that's their focus. That music is what binds their family together. So them and their children play, and it may only be for Thanksgiving and Christmas or Easter, but they all look forward to it and they talk about it the whole time leading up to that point. What have you practiced? What quartet are we going to play this year? So when you're making these posts and you're making any sort of social engagements, email blasts or any of that stuff, keep that in mind. Keep in mind who are you really after? Because like you said, everyone. That's not. I mean, violinists are niche. It's a very niche thing. I mean, 1% of the population plays the violin. I can't say everyone. Everyone needs. Everyone needs a table to eat on, but not everyone needs a violin. So build an avatar. Understand who is your ideal client and talk to them.
Yeah, I love that because especially when someone is starting out in business, they don't want to leave money on the table. So they really do think I have to market to everyone. And I tell them, no, say, and advertising on TV to, where it's going to be, millions of people, if you had that budget, that is such a waste when you should be maybe advertising in a trade publication or something like that, where you're hitting that specific thing. And so you're going from millions to maybe 100. But if those are the right 100 or maybe even 10, that's what you need to do. And that's, it is very hard for business people, especially starting out, to grasp that concept.
It's still hard for me every day, and it's not just reaching that audience is what do you do after you reach them? Did you give them a call to action? Did you give them something to do? And did you engage with them enough that's going to make them actually take a step towards contacting you? And how do you know? How do you know out of the 50 that you reached, how many reached out? And then how many did you convert? There's a lot of business stuff that I'm still learning.
Right. Well, and as you said, that takes you, though, away from your craft. And so that's the hard part.
Well, and that's, again, in the intro, you mentioned trying to step out of the business. So spend more time working on the business instead of in the business. I can fix violins all day long, but that's not going to help grow the business.
Right.
It's not going to find better, a better market. So yeah, just educate yourself on business. I mean, take time, read books, go to seminars, attend conferences.
Listen to podcasts.
You got it.
I love it. Well, oh my gosh, this has been so much fun. And I have learned so much. I mean, this to me is just fascinating. But if someone wants to reach you, because you never know who in our audience might be someone who is in that less than 1%. How do they find you, and what are the services that you provide?
Probably the best way, the all-encompassing way, is to reach out to Violin Shop Tampa.
Okay.
Google our name, Violin Shop in Tampa, we'll pop right up. We can service anybody from beginners to professionals. If you need to speak directly to me, just ask to speak to me. If I can't get to you right away, I'll certainly return the call. That's the easiest way.
Great. I love it. And we've got just a couple minutes left. So do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I would, on the topic of music and violins is, imagine a world without music. Each generation that we have is responsible for continuing what the previous generations have done. And if we don't continue to nurture and educate and improve what we already have, what's it going to be? I mean, a lot of my memories are linked to songs, so are linked to pieces of music, and I hear a piece of music and it takes me back 25 years, 30 years. Everyone's like that. So if you want music in the world, you got to keep playing.
I love it. And even if it's just on your car radio and you're singing along, if it brings you joy, that's what you need to do. And so I love that. Well, I have been having, just an absolutely best conversation with Dereck Coons. I'm Deb Creer. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.